I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. First and foremost, I got off a plane yesterday evening coming back from association business, the Fall Heads meeting. I'm on the board of governors for the association for our accrediting body. And so I landed last night, and I want to thank Ron and Brett and Lauren for making sure that this was all ready to go. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. And thank you very much to the TMSPA for providing refreshments this morning. Very much appreciated all around. I come back from the Fall Heads meeting, and this is always an opportunity for me to sort of touch base with other heads of school. It's an interesting job, obviously, and there's not a lot of people that do it in the country, and so it's always nice to sit down and touch base with people who share a real passion for independent education, who understand what it means to answer to both parents and faculty and students and administrators. And I always come back feeling really recharged that there's really not very many schools out there in the position that we are in right now. And that is really heartening because our enrollment is so strong, because our results are so good. There are some schools out there that are really struggling throughout the West, and it's really nice to come home and know that we have such a vibrant community and so much success happening. And so I'd like to just begin before I get into my prepared remarks, just talking about some of the successes that we've seen at the beginning of this school year. There is this sheet. I don't know how many of you guys had an opportunity to pick this up back on the refreshments table. This is really just an objective view of the Meadows advantage. And I share this when I speak with middle school parents who are talking with me and talking with their 7th and 8th graders about the next step. They talk about upper school and they think about where they're going to go for upper school. And I share this document with them to show just objectively what a Meadows education does for students. And it includes things like test scores. It includes the average test scores, both for us, for the state of Nevada, nationally. It takes into account some of our local private schools, and it just shows the differences between who we are and what we're able to accomplish and what anybody else is able to accomplish. And one of the stats that I just want to direct your attention to, whether you've got this in front of you or not, is on the side, this side here that has these lists of colleges. I asked our college counseling department to put this together. And what it is a comparison between universities' own acceptance rates and our acceptance rates, right? So when our kids apply to say, for example, the United States Military Academy at West Point, they accept 10% of their students. Over the course of the past 3 years, we've had an acceptance, which means that our acceptance rate based on that is 1,000% better than their own acceptance rate, right? That our kids get into these universities at a rate hundreds of times higher than their own acceptance rates, if that makes sense. And that's what that is compared to their own. You look at a Columbia, they only accept 6% of their population. The Meadows School Advantage is 217% higher than that, right? So that's the rate at which our kids are getting into these schools that are very, very competitive and very, very difficult to get into. So even though we're more focused on the right fit college, the right fit university, we're more focused on the education that we have, that we give students here than we are in some results, because like I've always said, I can't corner the market on Ivy League acceptances. That doesn't happen. But our kids, I think the proof is in the pudding. Their test scores this year, our students last year, their average ACT score was 31, which I think is a record for us. At least in the last 10 years, we haven't hit 31 as an average for our students. So I think that we're doing really well academically. On the enrollment front, things look really, really good. Ms. Anna Orsini in the advancement office has been very busy scheduling tours and making sure that our doors are open. We had a preview event that saw, I think, roughly 7 times the number of attendees that we had last year. The gym was full, super exciting. I'm actually talking with families now about 9th grade next year. That's never happened before, where I have people coming to me in the fall and winter to talk about fall of 2020. So there's a lot of interest in what's happening on the Meadows School campus, and we're super excited to welcome another full freshman class next year. So that's good news. We've got some additions that we've made to the campus in terms of we've started our athletics program. We wanted to expand it a little bit. We started a MAPS program. There's some growing pains there, but it's improving. Our lower school athletics program is going to expand outward from there. We're offering basketball and wrestling this winter, and we hope to continue to offer athletics programming just like we have added arts programming in MAPS, and we want to build that pipeline so that kids learn a love of the game and a love of competition, and they get to play with their classmates over the course of their years in lower school. We changed also the middle school schedule. Some of you middle school parents will recognize. I think that has yielded great results as well. We've got kids, their day ends at roughly 2:30. They go to PE or sports practice at that time, meaning that if you're on a sports team, you're finished early and you can go home and finish your homework and hopefully have dinner with your family and get into bed at a reasonable hour, so that we don't have middle schoolers especially doing sports practice late into the evening, which I think has been a real benefit to us. And then as far as our upper school program is concerned, I've been really excited about the addition of senior speeches. Some of you may have heard about that, but we're asking every senior to give a speech based on the idea, based around the This I Believe speech method. And so students have an opportunity to have a faculty member introduce them for 2 minutes, and then they have a 15-minute speech. And at first, seniors were like, oh God, another thing. I can't believe there's another thing. And now, I think, I mean, it's never everybody, but the vibe in the upper school surrounding those speeches has been really positive. And freshmen are already talking about, I can't wait, I'm looking forward to doing this. And they actually like hearing their classmates give these speeches. So I think it's been a real positive addition. Also, in the upper school, congratulations to our girls tennis team, who won their 5th straight state championship, which is awesome. The boys tennis team had a hard-fought season and came as runner-up, which is no small feat. They had a really great season as well. And the volleyball team is rolling. Everybody said, oh, it's going to be a rebuilding year. We lost a Division I athlete last year who was a centerpiece. But here we are doing really well. Regional competition starts this weekend, and state is in the South this year. So hopefully we make state and we can welcome the entire community to root on the volleyball team. So there's some cross-country runners going up to Reno as well. And the football team ended a really successful season. They actually played 11-person football for the last game of the season. So we're really gearing up to make sure that program is as safe as possible, is as sustainable as possible, and we look forward to probably 30 boys and girls, if this year is any indication, coming out in the fall, and we're going to play an 11-person football schedule. I say 11-person because we had 2 girls on the team this year, so it's not 11-man football, it's 11-person football. So we're super excited. I think that there's a lot of positivity happening on campus, but I didn't want to just sort of come. I was thinking, and I emailed Lauren and Heidi. I said, I'm at a loss. I don't know what to talk about in my coffee. And then I got to thinking about the kinds of things that are preoccupying me. Obviously, day to day, I'm preoccupied with the business of the school, thinking about the experience of the kids in the classroom. But like everybody else, I've got stuff that I'm reading or listening to, or just sort of thinking about as I think about the school and its community. And since our theme for the year has been community, right? We try to focus on this. We talk about it with the kids. We talk about it in our administrative meetings. How do we go about growing the Meadows School community and building that sense of togetherness, right? We're all here for a couple of reasons. The main one being that we share a belief in the transformative power of a great education, right? We believe that it's worth it. We believe that the hard work is worth it, that the money is worth it, that the time is worth it, that what you get in the end is a changed human being. We all believe this on some level. So we're all here sharing that common purpose. But as I started thinking about that, I started thinking about individual kids and individual issues. Because when you have a campus, it's really rare that you share a campus-wide issue, right? A campus-wide problem. Most often, the issues that arise are individual issues. You've got kids who come up, and parents and families who say, I have a problem, or I have a concern, and that concern is always much more particular to that family than it is global, right? So if a parent comes to me and says, I have a concern about X or Y, I don't say, well, let's look at this at the student-parent handbook, because I'm sure the solution has to be written down here, right? Oftentimes the rules are written in there, but that doesn't govern the particular instances that parents and students and families are facing. And so what I started thinking about, and what I've been thinking about a lot, has come from let's see, where are we here? I got ahead of myself. So what I'd like to share with you is three things. And one is an interrogation. And when I say that, I don't mean torture. I mean, I'd like to interrogate something that I've been thinking about a lot. And if you just bear with me, I sort of want to muse my way through something that has to do with the general and the particular. All right? And then I want to share with you an observation that I've had over the course of this year that I hope I can tie into that interrogation. And then finally, an experience that I've had over the course of the past 3 months that I think also informs this. So our theme for the year is community, and like I said, I keep whiplashing back and forth between this idea of the communal, right, the body politic, the issues facing all of us at the same time, and then the very particular experience of an individual kid in an individual classroom with an individual teacher learning individual lessons. And there's always this tension in education between standardization, right? You don't write lesson plans individually for 20 students in your second grade class. It's impossible. So there's a standardization to what you do in education. And then there's differentiation, the global, the particular, right? You have this general thing, the community, the larger thing, and then you have to focus every single day on every single student and their individual experiences at the same time. And that's the tension of education. Right? That's what it means to have a classroom in front of you, is to try to give an idea or express a notion to a group of students, knowing that it lands on their individual ears completely differently. As a teacher, I know that if I ever said, I was really disappointed in some of your essay responses, there's one kid who got an A who's sitting in the back saying, I can't believe he hates me. Right? Like it lands individually on individual kids, and we have to bear that in mind. So, to begin, an interrogation. What I've been thinking about over and over again, and I bent Dana Larson's ear about it for maybe 30 minutes one day, is it's a 3-part series in Malcolm Gladwell's podcast called Revisionist History. And it's season 4, episodes 5 through 7, if you're at all interested. But what he talks about in that 3-part series is Jesuitical thinking. And some of you who went to Catholic school may have gone to Jesuit schools, right? Loyola Marymount, Boston College, Georgetown, these are all Jesuit institutions. And the Jesuitical approach to problem solving and thinking started a long, long time ago. And the Jesuit order actually began in the 16th century, mid-1500s. And the Jesuits were the arm of the Catholic Church that was the educating body and on the front lines of what it meant to have a global reach for the papacy, right? So the Jesuits were the ones who were going out with the explorers. They were the ones who were representing the Catholic Church itself. They were on the front lines, right? And so as the explorers were encountering new people, they were encountering new problems. The old order didn't seem to make sense anymore, and what the Catholic Church had meant doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're meeting new people who have never seen a white person before, when you're meeting new peoples who have in fact rejected the Catholic Church. And so, do all of the old laws apply? And so what the Jesuits decided is they adopted a certain kind of problem solving that became known as casuistry. And it comes from the Latin casus, which is something has happened, right? I'm sure I'm murdering that, but I don't see a Latin teacher here, so I'm okay. But it has to do with an event, right? And so when times are different, when times have changed, we have to approach things in a new way. So, for example, for St. Augustine, lying was always wrong, right? You cannot bear false witness under any circumstances. No way, no how. But if you're a Jesuit priest and you're traveling in England during Elizabethan times, and someone says to you, "Are you a Catholic?" and you say yes, you are dead. You're executed. So is it wrong to save your own life? Some would say yes. But when you approach new situations, you have to approach them with new answers. And the general rule doesn't apply because you can't do the work of the Catholic Church if your head is on a pike outside the Tower of London, right? So if it's better for you to do the work of the church, then you need to find a new way of solving problems, of approaching these things. So let me just run through some examples that Gladwell gives. First is a baseball example. And so any of you who are not that interested in baseball, this won't be that much about baseball. It's much more about problem solving. But Andy Pettitte was a favorite pitcher for the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros. He was adored, revered. He was one of the good guys, right? He was one of those people that you wanted your son or daughter to model themselves after as an athlete. Did the right things. He was just, like I said, one of the good guys. And so when this performance-enhancing drug scandal came out in the early 2000s, people were shocked and appalled that Andy Pettitte's name appeared in the list of violators of the performance-enhancing drug rule. How could you do it, Andy? And what Andy Pettitte said in response to that is, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I've embarrassed everyone. And he got in a lot of trouble for the sort of half nature or the half-baked nature of his apology. Because he was like, I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I'm sorry I've embarrassed you. I never did it to get an edge. I just did it to recover from an injury and to get back on the field. Okay. And so what Gladwell suggests here is that Pettitte's line of reasoning is a new thing, right? Performance-enhancing drugs are a new thing. And so hold that in your mind for a second. On the other side of things, you've got Barry Bonds, perhaps the greatest baseball player of our generation. And late in his career, he's 37, 38 years old. He's been hitting 20, 30 homers every year, stealing 30 bases. I mean, the guy is impossibly good at his job. Suddenly, he's hitting 70 home runs. His head is this big, right? The guy went from a light outfielder who could chase down fly balls to a giant lumbering slugger. He went from a guy who was batting 300 to a guy who was batting 230 but hitting 70 homers. Completely changed him. And so, yeah, he was found guilty of using performance-enhancing drugs as well, and it'll likely keep him out of the Hall of Fame. So Gladwell's question is, if the principle, performance-enhancing drugs are bad, shouldn't use them ever. If that's applied, then Andy Pettitte, who used performance-enhancing drugs for a period of 3 months to recover from an injury, is the same as Barry Bonds, who used them over the course of years to get a competitive advantage and completely change his game. And what Gladwell's arguing is that when you've got new information, you have to change. You have to descend into the particular. So he uses the example of Tommy Johns. Now, maybe most of us have heard of Tommy John's surgery. Tommy Johns was this fantastic pitcher who tore his ulnar ligament, and then he had a very creative doctor who surgically repaired it. He came back, and his stats stayed right where they were. So he had a modern medical intervention that got him back on the mound quickly. You see where I'm going with this? Tommy Johns so the question is Andy Pettitte more like Tommy Johns, or is he more like Barry Bonds? Using modern technology and modern medicine to get back on the mound to do his job, or getting a competitive advantage. So the question here, you see where I'm going with this, that an overarching principle may not apply equally when you descend into the particular and look at particular cases. The next example that Gladwell uses is Dr. John Rock. And if you haven't heard of Dr. John Rock, he is the person who is most responsible for coming up with one of the great medical breakthroughs of all time, which is the pill. And he developed the pill after working for years and years in the Irish tenements of Boston, seeing firsthand what having 13 and 14 children before the age of 30 will do to you, and what it does to the community, and what it does to individual families, and what it does to women, frankly. And so he developed this, but the catch is that Dr. John Rock is a devout Catholic. And so he has to try to square his Catholicism and his belief in the papacy and the Pope's directive that all birth control is wrong. And so what Gladwell says is, wait a second. How does he square this? How does he remain a devout Catholic and then develop this drug that flies in the face of Catholic teaching? And what Rock said was, look, let's descend into the particulars. Let's engage in a bit of casuistry and think about this. Not all birth control is wrong, according to the Catholic Church. Right? The rhythm method exists, and that is something that has been embraced by the Catholic Church. Now, right or wrong, that is a form of birth control. Right? And I'm not passing any kind of judgments at all, but that is the line, right, for the Catholic Church. And what John Rock said is, look, is this more like what the Pope was describing when he said anything frustrating the procreative act is wrong? When that Pope was talking, he was talking about prophylactics, right? He's talking about diaphragms and condoms. And what John Rock is saying is, no, that's not this. What the pill is much closer to the rhythm method because it alters the rhythms of the human body. That is much closer. And so this is his argument. And in fact, they put together a council in the 40s, and overwhelmingly, these thinkers who were priests and cardinals and so forth, overwhelmingly, they agreed with John Rock. They said, look, this is far closer to what the papacy has said is okay than not. But in the end, Pope John, I think it was John the 6th, or yes, something like that, I'm sorry. The one who came before Pope John Paul, obviously not a Catholic, he said ultimately no, sorry. And so what he did is he erred on the side of principle instead of descending into the particular case of women who, probably many of whom could have been helped by a degree of family planning. So this, I think, is a really fascinating example simply because it's sort of on the nose of the casuistry discussion. The third thing that Gladwell uses is about unarmed police shooting victims. And this is such a difficult thing for so many of us that on the one hand, you're like, how can the cops be shooting all of these people, oftentimes people of color, who are not armed? How does this keep happening? But what Gladwell does, I think, really brilliantly is he takes a couple of examples. One is Ferguson, and he says, yes, that was probably a big mistake, the person who was shot in Ferguson. But it had less to do with the individual cops and the individual victim than it had to do with a complete system that was designed to get people pulled over and ticketed again and again and again. In fact, the business arm of the city was actually informing the cops how many people they needed to pull over that month. So the finance side was informing the policing side in a way that was totally inappropriate. But that's not what we get lost in, right? We get lost in the cops are bad, right? Or you have no respect for law and order. We stay up here at these principles rather than descending into the particular cases when every case is completely different. Right? And so what we want to do in this culture, and I keep coming back to what it means to be an educator and what it means to run a school, what we keep wanting to do is to broad brush everything, to say like, well, you have no respect for law and order, just do what the cops say. Well, you're supporting racist cops. Like none of these arguments make any sense if you will actually take a moment and see what happens in each individual case. And so that's what I think we're tasked to do as educators. It's really easy to say, this is the rule, and it applies equally in every single circumstance. But it's not. Kids are messy, right? Families are messy. Nuance is messy. And you have to be willing to descend into it and look at what's happening in individual cases. So what I started thinking about is how does this apply to my role? So I started thinking, the issue of cell phones and technology in school. What is that most like, right? We can say, it's a distraction. The principle is, it is wrong. But when is a cell phone most like the Library of Congress? The entire sum total of human knowledge in your pocket. When is a cell phone more like the Library of Congress? And when is it more like passing a friend the answers in class? It depends, right? It depends on the moment that you see it, the moment that you're applying the rule. So often, the technology that we're using is more like the Library of Congress. And we as educators want to step back and say, no, it's wrong, you can't ever use it, it's you're cheating or you're being distracted or whatever else. Sometimes, yes, it's like passing a friend the answers in class. But we as educators need to be able to descend into the particular in order to figure these things out. Another question. Social media. Social media is bad. It's so distracting. It's destroying our children. They've got depression and anxiety, and they can never leave the issues at school. They have to bring them home with them. But when is social media more like your grandmother's birthday party or a family reunion than it is a vicious clique in high school? When is social media more likely to bring people together and help them understand each other than it is to drive them apart and persecute one another? Right? This is the same thing, right? Social media. We're talking about Facebook. Well, the kids aren't talking about Facebook. That's for old people like us, right? But we're talking about Snapchat. We're talking about other platforms that I haven't heard of. And this is what we have to do as parents and teachers is not get stuck on the principle, because then we don't serve the kids the way that we want to. We're only serving principles that don't care about children, right? We do care about children. So again, I'm turning all of this stuff over in my head. And as we get here, at what point do we understand that descending into the particular, and more importantly, understanding why others descend into the particular for their own purposes, and I'm going to get to that, is the only way to do what St. Ignatius said we had to do about 400 years ago, which is attempt to alleviate one another's suffering, attempt to do what's right by each other. So, it brings me to an interesting set of quotations that I found recently. Even when we focus on community, we have to understand that communities are made up of particulars. This is shown a little bit by these quotations from educational leaders at Stanford 100 years apart. In 1916, the dean of the Stanford Graduate School of Education said, "Our schools are," that says are, not read, in a sense, factories in which the raw products are to be shaped and fashioned into products to meet the various demands of life. That was how Stanford thought about educating people 100 years ago. That we are a factory shaping children to enter factories. And now, Heather Mullen, the director of research at Stanford Center on Adolescence, which is this incredible group that is doing more work to further what we know about the adolescent brain and how it functions than any group in the world. What if purpose were the purpose of education? Our children's lives, their humanity, their self-worth, their purpose are more important than the churning machinery of the system. An interesting sort of change over 100 years. 100 years ago, you had the totality, the collective, right? Education, as we now understand it, was largely made up by industry titans who wanted better factory workers, right? Now, this is not the purpose of our education. Our education is much more personalized, much more individualized. We descend into the particular here, right? We focus on each individual student, trying to get them to meet the expectations that we have for them. And in fact, when we talk to kids, when our college counselors talk to kids about the next step, we talk about what is your passion? What is your purpose? What are you like? What do you want? We've stopped talking about, is your SAT and AP scores up to snuff, and ending the conversation there. Yeah, we talk about that, but then so much more is about how are you serving your community? What do you care deeply about? So that is the end of my interrogation. The next thing that I've been thinking about, this is an observation that I've just had as things have sort of changed a little bit on campus. We're looking at the way we do athletics, the way that we do some arts, the way that we do maps. And as these changes happen, I'm seeing an impatience, right? Parents are coming to me and saying, that's great, but, or I see this, but my kids are having a really great experience in middle school, but. And I've been thinking about it because it's really frustrating, right, for me, because I'm like, yes, we're doing all this stuff. I'm really excited about the direction the school is going. And sometimes what I get from families is, yeah, but what I've started to realize is that this impatience is not selfishness. It's a desire to speak back to the community, to talk about the particular, to say, yeah, you're implementing these programs. These programs are awesome, but... And they keep descending back to where they are with their own child. And of course they should. And so it has occurred to me that impatience is born of a sense of observed potential. That impatience with the institution or a system or a program so often is born out of this idea that we have not yet achieved the potential that people see. It's hopeful in a way. Because people aren't saying like, well, that's a really great program you developed, Mr. Gregerson. And no one says like to a teacher, what a fantastic syllabus, right? They respond to the class according to their child's experience of the class because they're not there. And you know what? The kids don't say this syllabus has changed my life either, right? They have an experience of the class that is life-changing to them. And that has got me thinking a lot. That impatience means that we have more work to do, right? To serve those individual needs. Because if it was just about developing systems, that's what we do all summer before the school year starts, right? We develop systems, we develop programs, we change schedules, we work together to try to serve the totality. And then guess what? We get bogged down in the particular. So the change, if we're lucky, can foster improvement, and then improvement exposes potential, and then potential propels impatience. And it does this. And so I've started reading that impatience as a sort of, okay, great, yes, it might be good, it might be bad, but this is my personal experience. And I've been working really hard on valuing and sort of embracing that personal experience, because 870 students on this campus have 870 experiences, regardless of me trying to stay up here and define program. And so some of the examples of the changes that we've seen is, we've developed the MAPS program in lower school, and I've had people say, but the program's not as good as it could be. And the program didn't exist 6 months ago, right? Here we go. Let's get it. Let's get it right, and let's improve it. The middle school schedule. People have said, I really like this, but, can I do something else? Can we expand it? Can we have more opportunities to do electives? And yes, right? The answer is yes, but we've been doing this for 3 months. And it's just this wonderful sense of impatience that is really inspiring. The beginning school expansion the expansion of the beginning school population has done a number on that staff. And the staff has said, and Sarah has said, she keeps coming back to me, and we're working out the details of what it looks like to have a beginning school that is bursting at the seams. And yeah, that yields problems. And so Sarah and the faculty have come to me and said, here's some issues that we're facing. And my response to that can't be, we just expanded, what's your problem, right? So these good things are happening, but there's growing pains as they happen. The same thing is happening with increased enrollment and admissions interest. We've got the advancement office is fielding all of these things. The upper school faculty and staff have been great about this, but they're feeling what it's like to add 3 kids to a section in freshman year. Just 3, right? Over the course of 5 sections, that's 15 kids. But they're feeling that sense of growing pains. And it's like, hey, great news, we filled the freshman class for the first time. Yeah, but, right? And so this is a kind of, when are we going to get there? And it's a feeling of personal response to global change, right? The larger community descending into the particular here. And so, finally, an experience that I've had over the course of the past 3 months. So almost all of you know that I was a parent before, and I'm still a parent now. And so the number one questions that I'm getting are, how's the baby, and are you sleeping? And these questions are really interesting because they make me think about the personal, right? About my own experience of having a newborn in the house. But what kind of a monster would stop there and just say, well, I'm very tired? right? Like that is not how you focus on being a parent or being a teacher. You don't focus on your personal experience. You have to broaden your perspective and say, yes, there's a new addition to our household, but there's so much more. Is the nursery too hot or too cold? You start thinking much more globally if you're not some kind of sociopath. And so with that, it's sort of, this is my secret weapon, by the way. So it's sort of renew parenthood, and the funniest thing is that I've gotten this whiplash from the particular to the total, right? So I've got people saying, "Don't blink; they grow up so fast," and I'm like, I don't sleep, much less blink, or enjoy these precious moments, and that's the very general, right? These precious moments, as Liz hands me a screaming, smelly child, in the particular. Right? Or isn't he just perfect? Yeah, broadly. And Liz is the one handling all this. She's been he's had 700 doctor's appointments or so since he was released from the NICU. He's perfect, but he keeps going back to the doctor again and again. And so you get this sort of like broad experience and people love to say this about babies, that they're such a blessing. Isn't it great? Isn't it wonderful? And I'm like, I did this 10 years ago, and I see where it goes. So no. It's going to be great, and it's a struggle now. So there is this sort of whiplash between the totality of experience, like parenthood is this big thing, and then you have the particular moment, the rough night, right? The sick baby. And so again, I keep doing this sort of back and forth between thinking about the global and the particular, and Billy is a part of that because he is part of my lived experience. So really, just to sort of reiterate, in interrogation, the Gladwell piece just keeps turning over in my head, and I'm probably going to keep doing research on the Jesuits and casuistry because of that. My observation again is that I'm sort of starting to welcome this kind of impatience for what it means to our community, because it means that we can keep getting better, keep growing, and keep treating each individual with the dignity and hope and promise that I think that we should. And then finally, the experience is that you can't just focus on the particular. You've got to take the global and then back down, and the global and back down again and again. And it is, again, as an educator, that tension between the standardization and the differentiation, the big and the little. And so I want to leave you with some final thoughts. This is from Sir Ken Robinson. He wrote, "Children are born into one world. They're born into two. There's the world around them, the world of other people and things that exist whether or not they do as individuals. This world was there before they came into it, and it will be there when they are gone. There is also the world within them, the internal world of their own consciousness, which came into being when they did and exists only because they do." And so this is the idea of an educator, is that you've got this outside world and you've got the interior world of every child on your campus and in your care. And so this is sort of how I've been thinking about the fall and how I've been thinking about the kids, and thinking that we need to remember that as much as we assume we're telling the stories of our lives in broad arcs, that everything we do is particular, that no two instances are the same, and no two children experience our school and the lessons that we teach in the same way. So as much as we've focused on the idea of community throughout this year so far, in our belief that a great education comes as a result of a partnership between schools and parents and pupils, we have to constantly remind ourselves that we're serving individuals with individual needs. Every moment for every one of us is so different from every other moment, and each experience so isolated from the worlds of those experiences of those surrounding us. We must always err on the side of empathy. We have to err on the side of believing in the experience of other people. We have to trust in the interior lives of others. and understand that the task of education is attempting to make connections with those we come into contact with, and especially coming into contact with those whose lives we seek to improve through the educational process. Thanks. So we're coming up on 9 o'clock. I'm happy to answer any questions or take appointments if you'd rather not follow on this TED Talk with a question about carpool. I understand.